Does it matter who files first in a divorce? No, at least not in my opinion, and not in Texas. I mean, look, if I had to choose, I really would be super specific about your unique situation and how that might play out for you. There are two advantages I can think of to filing first, one of which you may see as a disadvantage. So, the first thing if you file first is you will go first in a hearing or at your final trial. So you get to set the stage, you get to tell the story, you get to speak first. The other side of that is if you're not first, you get to respond, which sometimes I like to do that better depending on your situation. The second benefit of filing first, which can also be seen as a detriment, is once you go to mediation and hopefully settle your case, your attorney is going to be the one to draft the final order, which is good because you get to say what's in it and kind of set the tone, and kind of bad because then you have to be the one to pay for it. And usually by the point that you're at mediation and making a deal, this whole idea that like everybody pays the fees or splits them is kind of over. And usually at that point, your remaining attorney's fees are going to come out of your side of the equation. So you may think, hey, do I just want to wait and respond? And then I'm not on the hook for drafting. And here's the thing, it's not a like rule by the law that that's how it goes, but it's definitely the course of performance and the custom within at least the Texas family law bar that whoever filed first is the one who drafts. So does it matter whether you file first? Not really. It could have a couple benefits that also are drawbacks. Do not get stuck on this point. Just listen to what your lawyer says and file when the time makes the most sense for you and your family. People are always trying to figure out when is the right time to file for divorce. Really, that's a pretty fact specific question to you and your family that only you and your lawyer and maybe your close circle can figure out. But I can tell you a couple times you don't want to file for divorce. One of those is in the busiest season at work. So let's say you're an accountant and you've got all the tax deadlines coming up in March and April. Filing for divorce in beginning of March or in February when you know what's about to come for you is probably not the best plan. Like get everything filed, give yourself a minute, and then get filed with the court on your divorce. So like think about your work and the seasonality and how that works and how that may play out in your life. A second time you don't want to file for divorce is when you're at your lowest point. Like so many people wait until they're at the total end of their rope with absolutely nothing left in the tank. And then they file for divorce. And then they start probably the most, or at least one of the most difficult journeys they're ever going to go on when they're at their lowest possible moment as a parent and as a person. I'd much rather you file at, 20% capacity at least, like you've still got some gas in the tank before you go ahead and take your first step on that journey. So there's no exact right time to file for divorce, but there are definitely a couple wrong times. To file for divorce in Texas, there is one main thing you have to do. You have to file what's called a petition for divorce. In other states, they call this a complaint. So if you see that stuff online when you're Googling things or maybe in a movie, in Texas, we call it a petition. So you got to get that thing filed first. It's sort of what takes you off the starting block and begins the entire process. The next thing you need to do after you file a petition is get the party that you're divorcing served. This is where a lot of people stall out. Like if you're trying to do this yourself, or if the person you're trying to divorce is evading or like hiding from service, this piece can get pretty complicated pretty fast. Most of the time it's not. Like most of the time, the party accepts service where like the dude comes to the door, a process server, and says, hey, I've got papers for you. And they're like, okay. And then they sign it. Hopefully. That is relatively easy. Then the process server takes what's called a return of service, like, hey, I gave them the papers, and sends that back to the court. But sometimes it's not that simple, and you have to try to chase someone down or find them, or maybe they're in another country, or you don't even have a last known address. Then it can get a little bit more complicated. So the first step, getting the actual petition filed, is relatively straightforward and simple once you've made up your mind to do it. Service can be pretty simple, or you can languish there for a few weeks or months, depending on whether they hire a lawyer and whether they're hard to track down. Did you know that in Texas, you can file for a no-fault divorce, which may seem a little silly because I bet you think the other party is at fault when you're filing, right? But it's not fault in the way that we would use that term. It's a legal term of art. And that just means, look, nobody's trying to say there was infidelity, cruelty, domestic violence, or some of these pretty serious fault-based grounds. They're saying we can't get along, sort of irreconcilable differences. It's just not working out. The legitimate ends of the marriage are no longer viable. So you just say, no fault, no harm, no foul. We're going to move forward and get divorced. You wouldn't file a no-fault divorce, however, if you wanted to plead for some sort of fault. And why that matters is if you prevail, like you win, on your claim for fault, sometimes you can get a disproportionate share of the estate, like more money. So you need to think through carefully, given your unique situation, of which of those options are best for you and your family. Fault, no fault. If you think you want to plead for fault in the breakup of your marriage, I'm going to tell you to pump the brakes. And here's the thing. Once that toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to put it back in. Like, you can always get meaner, but you can't really get nicer in what you put in those initial papers. And I want you to think through. This paperwork is going to be filed on God's green internet for the whole entire world to see. Do you really want to put your family's dirty laundry in papers that eventually someday your kids are going to be able to read and access? Maybe, but I would make that decision very carefully with the lawyer, and I bet you're not the sort of person who wants to do that. To prepare for divorce, there are 4 steps you need to take to secure the best possible outcome for yourself and your family without losing your kids, your money, or your sanity. First, you need to start with the end in mind. And what I want you to be thinking about is both long-term and short-term. What are you wanting to get out of this? It's like Simon Sinek says, start with why. That way, throughout this process, when things get really tough, you have a clear picture of what you're working for 3, 5, 10 years from now, and what you need while the process is ongoing. Second, craft your all but done plan, ABD. This is what I tell clients. You need to know what you're going to do once you're off to the races in this divorce. How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pick the kids up from school? How are you going to make sure that you can put gas in your car? You need to get specific and detailed and clear so that you know who's on first, because the time to make those decisions is not when you're neck deep in the process. Third, you need to build your file cabinet. And I'd like to see you building an online digital file cabinet in a Google Drive that you access in incognito mode, where you gather important documents you're going to need throughout your divorce, like bank statements, credit card statements, kids' school records. The time to start is not after you file. And then fourth, I need you to become parent of the year. And look, you probably are parent of the year, but can you prove it? Do you have evidence of dropping your kids off at daycare, being the one to go to their doctor's visits, that you're the person who handles bath time, bedtime? You might consider even creating a journal like Day One Journal, or Our Family Wizard has a journal, where you document your kids' activities every day and who performs them. At the end of the process, when you're really ready to get going in your divorce, that documentation is going to be vital for your lawyer and save you so much time and energy at a moment when conserving those two things will be extremely important. So to prepare for divorce, I need you to start with the end in mind. Craft your all but done plan. Build your file cabinet and become parent of the year. You do this, it will save you so much heartache, so much money, and so much energy throughout the whole process. Your entire divorce will be faster, cheaper, and easier. I promise. And when you get started, completing these 4 pillars can seem completely overwhelming. I've been there. You barely have your head above water. You feel like your entire life is walking on eggshells and you don't know where to turn. Here's the thing. I've created an online course to answer those exact questions and come alongside you, because you're not in this alone. I've done it. I've been there. And God, I wish somebody would have told me all of the things I had to learn from the School of Hard Knocks. I did it wrong, and I've crafted this course so that you don't have to make those same mistakes, cost you your kids, and tens of thousands of dollars that would have been saved had I done it this way. So I'd like to invite you to join a free webinar where we will walk through an overview of the 4 phases and what you can do at each phase to get started on your journey to a faster, cheaper, and easier divorce.